It's Television Man.
Hi, I'm Helen Joyce Burroughs, and we're here today to talk about our upcoming textile exhibition in McLean, Virginia in January. Kay and I have traveled the world together for 30 years, representing American technology and products, and now we are sharing a new adventure, and that is our artwork. I am a painter, and I'm now doing adding textiles in various forms to my artwork, and I will let Kay tell you about what she's doing.
I started out many years ago as a traditional quilter, doing pieced quilting. I inherited my maternal grandmother's quilts, and that inspired me to take a class in quilting. When I became pregnant with my daughter, I wanted to make her a quilt, and so I took the class, and from then on I was hooked on it. It's an amazing way that one can express feelings, memories, all sorts of things that are very precious to our lives, and I love doing it.
I thought I would tell you a little bit about my experiment with art. I started out doing silk ribbon embroidery. I went to a class in New Mexico and in France to study silk ribbon embroidery. And after a while, I decided I really wanted to do my own designs. So I took up painting, and I went from oil pastel to acrylic to oil, all of the mediums which I enjoyed, and they each have their own advantage. Now I have come back full circle, combining my silk ribbon embroidery with my acrylics. And this is one example that I would like to show you how I have combined the acrylics with the silk ribbon. And these are, individual techniques, different ribbons, different forms of primarily silk. And this one also is all silk. This is a larger form of ribbon in terms of developing the design. These are both on unprimed canvas painted with acrylic, and then the design is enhanced with silk. Then I started experimenting, making my own wool, and this is done with wool roving with a wet rolling technique, where the design is embedded in the wool as you create the substrate. And then I did other forms of wool and then embellished it into the design of the substrate. This is a very small piece. Again, this is with the wet wool roving, and I have added to the embedded design embellishments with silk lash, cotton thread, and other forms of an embellishment, which I think gives the wet wool roving a much greater depth when you have the embellishment with the wool. So I have done the acrylic with the silk ribbon embroidery. And then I have done the techniques with the wet felting, embedding it into the design, and adding embellishment to the wet felting. And now I am doing a dry felting technique with a binder. And you can see that I have actually made the design with different forms of wool roving. I've used silk hankies and silk lash all over to make this design. And the thing that I do enjoy about the dry wool technique that I have developed is there's a much fluffier and more depth to the piece. Although I love the embellishment, but this, I think, suits itself more to landscape designs. And those are the techniques that I'm working with at the moment. In my show that's coming up in January, I will have 37 pieces that I have developed. And I've had a great deal of fun doing it. I'm a meditator, and all of these different techniques that I've been using are almost a form of meditation for me. So I hope that you'll come to the show and enjoy all the different techniques, and I'd love to hear your comments on them and look forward to meeting you. Thank you.
As I mentioned earlier, I started out as a traditional quilter, inspired by my mother's love of hand needlework and inheriting my maternal grandmother's quilts. I have about 8 of them, and I treasure them. But as an artist, you have to grow. And I graduated from traditional piece quilts into applique quilts. In the beginning, I used other people's patterns. And I have an example of that, which I will show you. As I mentioned, I evolved from a piecer into an appliquer. Primarily, I like to do hand needle turn applique. I started out using other people's patterns, and this is a good example. Everything is hand appliqué, but it's not my pattern. And after a while, for an artist, I think that becomes less satisfying. So I began to look for inspiration in other places. And one of my very favorite techniques is making a pattern from a photograph. I will have 4 quilts in the exhibit that are done that way, and I would like to point out the one that's directly behind me here. This quilt is called Friendship. It's 2 different species meeting on the beach of a morning, discussing the weather, where to find the best food. I just love this quilt, and the pattern comes from a photograph that my daughter took in Bradenton Beach in Florida. And I have used that technique for other quilts. This is another example. I have a very good friend who is a painter, and she gave me one of her paintings with the idea that we would experiment to see if you could create a scene using fabric that would inspire the same feelings and emotions that a painting of the same scene inspires. And I think we were very successful in doing that. A lot depends on the fabric manufacturers, because with fabric, you can't do all the subtle things that you can do with paint. And so this is a technique I really love. This is another example of that. This is an example of trying to use different techniques in a quilt. You can see here that there is embroidery with the spider. There are little animals everywhere, and a crow. It makes the scene come alive. It tells a story. And basically, I like to make story quilts. This one is a different technique. It's an experiment in trying to use one pattern, in this case the cat, and make the cat different in every scene by simply manipulating the templates that you use. There's a lot of embroidery in this. You can see the embroidery in the eye there in the center. There's a lot of beading and embellishments are added just to make it kind of fun. And actually, I think it's successful in presenting cats as something people can relate to, because my grandchildren have identified cats here that they believe portray what their cat is like. And finally, there is quilts that are just fun. I just, as an artist, just loved making this, creating this quilt. It's happy. It has lots of color in it. And when I look at it, I feel that it's all going to be okay.
Well, it's been fun talking to you today, and I hope that you've enjoyed some of the techniques that I'm starting to experiment with, and that I hope that you will join us at the show in January at the McLean Textile Gallery. Thank you.
I've enjoyed being interviewed. Thank you very much for your interest in my art, and hopefully you'll be at our exhibit.
The event is Fiber and Quilt Textile Creations by K. Thompson Summitt and Helen Joyce Burroughs at the Textile Gallery, 6819 Elm Street, McLean, Virginia, on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays from 11 o'clock a.m. to 4 o'clock p.m., January 17th through February 23rd, 2023, with a reception on Sunday, January 22nd, 2023, from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock p.m. RSVP at 703-534-7027.